Welcome to the Deep Specialization Podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Today, I'm joined by Eric Brown and Nora DiNuzzo from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate you having us.
I'm super excited for your conversation. Kind of kick things off by sharing a little bit about who you are and the work you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nora and I both have about 15 years working in and around agencies. I was in-house at an agency driving growth for about 6 years, and I spent the last 10 years consulting into agencies. I'm going to give Nora a moment to tell about herself, but she never does a good job of bragging on herself. She has been in two specific agencies that she has led through a scale to sell opportunity, and the last agency she was at, she tripled in 3 years. And so I just think that's incredible and worth bragging about, because there are capabilities, there's skills, there's awareness that came from that, from her pitching hundreds of brands, that we're able to bring that into the agencies that we talk to. And I just think that's very, very valuable. So that is my tout from my co-founder, Nora, but I'll let you take a second to talk about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Eric. I was saying today, because we're recording here on Valentine's Day, and I sent Eric a text this morning, like, thank you for being my partner in business and my perfect match. And it's so funny because we talk about how different we actually are as people, but that's actually an advantage to our clients. And it's advantage in working together that we're not just like an echo chamber for each other. So we come from pretty different backgrounds and approaches to business development. You know, it was fun hearing Eric's venture into agencies, like how his path was different than mine, and starting all the way back to Yellow Page, sales, and really the sales aspect of it. And mine is a little bit more of the business development strategy, pitch strategy side of things. And it was funny, came up, started as an account manager, always at independent agencies. So I like to say I'm Indie AF, everything from a 10-person boutique to a 200-person multi-office shop, which where I am in Pittsburgh is a larger shop, but not so much for New York or other ways. But I was always told, the feedback I would get on my performance reviews is, wow, you're really strategic for a business developer, meaning I am a horrible project manager. I am not a paper pusher. I don't do Gantt charts. And thankfully, most of my career, I had a great project management team and partners to be able to help me through that part. But what I really love is the psychology. That's why I got into advertising. I like to say I was predestined for it. It's in my blood. My father was a musician, or is. Both my parents are still with me. They're just retired from their careers, so they're loving retirement. But my dad and his whole side of the family is artists and musicians. My mom's whole side of the family is therapists. So really, to me, advertising is the union of art and psychology. And I was that kid, for fun, reading my mom's copy of the DSM-4. I loved psychology, but truthfully, I really just didn't want to listen to people's personal problems for a career. There's a saying amongst therapists that every therapist needs a therapist. And that is true. And so I was you know what? I don't want to listen to people's personal problems all day. And I am a musician, I'm a singer. And I was I don't want to rely on my voice for my career. So what could I do that would bring psychology and art together? And that's what led me to advertising. So just a little bit of my background in that respect, what got me here. But we love the people of advertising. We love the world of advertising. And even though I stepped away from it for a little bit to focus on consulting small businesses, Eric pulled me back in a few months ago and said, hey, I see what you're doing with the small businesses, but you're really good at agencies and you really know agencies, and why don't we do this thing together? And I was you know what? We should. So that's why we're here.
Here we are. That's awesome. I did not know you have a background in singing. I think that's really great. I might ask you to sing for us later.
Oh gosh. Well, not after running a 2-hour workshop. Oh boy. I'm be hoarse. Call me on the wrong day, Corey.
Yeah, that's all good. Maybe we'll do a follow-up. Both of you have a tremendous amount of real world experience in growing agencies. Now with your company, your consultancy, you are helping agencies. What is some of the specific problems you help agencies solve?
It really starts with helping them understand the why behind their growth. We talk a lot about what do you want to accomplish and by when. And Corey, the two challenges that we see with most agencies is they don't have a clear growth strategy and they don't have the resources to execute that strategy. And we know a lot of the reasons why. The majority of agencies are born and they've grown from their network, and that kind of runs dry at a point in time. And also, agencies are typically not built around being sales engines. And so it's kind of the antithesis of why most, the seed of most agencies. But having an understanding of what you want to accomplish and what it's going to take to get there is paramount to being successful. And we just really want to help provide that for agencies. Like, what is that path that's going to take you from where you are to where you want to go, with the understanding of the resources that you have available to accomplish that goal, and then support them in getting there.
Your website has this great headline. It says, "You've worked too hard for it to be this hard." And I think that kind of speaks to your ethos as a brand and really the kind of agencies you're trying to attract. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we wrote that line and we're thinking about who our audience is, like, it could be every agency owner, but it's probably not every agency owner, right? It's a certain mindset of an owner that's been through a particular struggle and is at a certain place in the life cycle of their business. And, I thought a lot about the people I worked for my whole career, the owners of the agencies I worked for in my 20s and 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. But, this idea that we as agency people do pour so much of our own blood, sweat, and tears into the business. It's the nights, it's the weekends, it's the being on the planes and the trains and the crazy car rental snafus and missing holidays, missing our kids' baseball games, unfortunately at the worst extremes, like having, relationship difficulties or breakups, having drug or alcohol problems. Truly, our industry puts a lot of people through the ringer. A lot of people figure out a way to live it and love it. And a lot of people it kind of chews up and spits out. So just thinking about all those blood, sweat, and tears that we've all poured into this work, and we wouldn't do it if we didn't love it, right? Like we love something about advertising, about marketing that compels us to do this, because yes, you can make a good living at it, but also there's a lot you risk and put at stake, in doing that, So any business that's deadline driven, I would say, is the same. So we thought about that, and especially for those agency owners getting towards the end of their career, who maybe want to sell their business, who want to exit at some point, who do want to retire, who don't want to die working, is the next generation ready to buy your business out from under you? Do you have something that's sellable? Do you have something somebody else wants? And sometimes I think we get so kind of tied up in working in the business that we don't work on the business. It's kind of like an ostrich, with our head in the sand. It's we're down in the sand, and then one day we look up and we're like, I want to sell this thing. I want to retire. And it's do we actually have something that anybody wants to buy? So that's another thing that we kind of help agencies think through, especially if they're later in the stage of their cycle, is really 4 growth modes that we work within. Stabilize, we call them the 4 S's: stabilize, sustain, scale, or sell. So almost every agency is in one of those phases, and you can go through multiple of those phases over the course of multiple years. So some years are bad years, and you had a cliff off the ocean, you had a bit of a free fall, and it's what strategies you need to employ and what sort of mindset you need for your team to dig back out of a hole. Very different than if you're doubling or tripling down on growth you've already had. So a lot of this is mindset and just helping agency owners and leaders think through where are we now, to Eric's point, where are we trying to go? What has just happened in the last 3 years? Usually 3 years is the most instructive period. And it's also what most acquirers are looking at as far as your books. So were you profitable the last 3 years? Was your revenue going up the last 3 years? What story is the last 3 years telling you or someone else? That's really important. So yeah, those are kind of the modalities we help agencies think through. But of course, everyone needs to be growing, because if you're not growing, you're dying. So everyone should be concerned with growth. But
they say.
That's what they say. How motivated by growth are you? And we have a saying that like, in order to work with us, like you need to be willing to participate in your own growth. So we have our own company, you have your own company. We are not just going to become like part of your company. Like we might be working in a fractional capacity on your business and in your business with you. However, it is still your company at the end of the day. You need to be responsible for growing it. We will help you, but we're not just going to come in and do it for you. Like gone are the days that I'm someone's full-time business developer and like doing it all for them. Like, nope, I'm not doing that anymore, but I will help and Eric will help,
Love that.
The other thing that I would add to that, Corey, is, that line, you've worked too hard for it to be this hard. Nora touched on it a little bit, but it's like we realize why it's hard, and it's not hard because of the clients. Like you always knew that there was going to be the client challenges, and oftentimes like the struggle that we hear from most agencies is because of the growth challenge. So we talk to tens of agencies every month, and it's not about like. Yes, there's like staffing issues and there's like changes in the marketplace, but like that's not really what is bearing like the weight bearing down on most agencies. We've talked to numerous agencies that like they've said, hey, like we're really ready to just hang this thing up, and the reason why is because they don't have the growth potential, and or they don't have the types of clients that they set out to service. Like when they had the dream of becoming an entrepreneur and going off on their own or starting their own shop, they had an idea of the things that they wanted to do and the types of brands they wanted to do that for. And like, this isn't like the sexy thing that they were probably thinking about, but it does directly relate to their pipeline. And if their pipeline is not supporting the financial requirements of their team and their growth and the type of work that they want to do, then like they're not fulfilling their dreams. And that's where it comes, like, that's what it boils down to for Nora and I, as she talked about, like, we love the people of advertising. We love their passion, their creativity, and the fact that they, like us, are entrepreneurs and they set out to do something that, like, they didn't set out for that thing to break or to fail. And we know how to support them in ensuring that it doesn't fail. But yes, like Nora said, they've got to be willing to participate in their own growth. And again, it's not the idea that they had like, I'm going to go and start this creative shop or this, this experiential shop or whatever it was. And like, they were like, going to think every day about their pipeline. But that is the things that we get into when we work with agencies start way before that. And it dictates how they appear, how they think about themselves, how they articulate themselves, their core branding. But then those are the things that enable or inform and dictate their pipeline.
Very cool. So, having been also in the agency space for a while, I know that especially in the earlier days of building an agency, it's very tactical. It's a very tactical organization. Like there's processes and SOPs and there's all these steps, and it's very manual in some respects. But over time, the founders, to your point, need to start thinking about the strategy. At what point does an agency, in their life cycle, when does strategy really become the forefront of what they should be focusing in on?
I mean, if you could have done it from the beginning, that would have been great. However, we know, and this is true of startups too, and really like when any agency starts up, they're a startup. So like a lot of times what startups really need is they need to get going. They need momentum, they need movement, they need MVP, and they need traction, right? Like to use the startup lingo. So it's like, but strategy takes time. So a lot of times what doesn't happen at the beginning when you're trying to like prove MVP and traction is if you don't think to start strategically, you might have built a brand on sand a little bit. Like you might not have laid all the foundation that you needed to lay or should have laid. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you can't go back and reverse engineer or relay some foundation from a strategy standpoint. So that's one thing we're trying to analyze and sort of dive in and diagnose for our clients is what they kind of all have in common is they're not growing at the rate they want to be and they can't figure out why. It's like, my P&L says that I'm not growing at the rate I want to be. My balance sheet says I'm not growing at the rate I want to be. My margins or my EBITDA is not where I want it to be. So it's like, all right, I want the picture to change, but I'm not sure how to change it. I'm not exactly sure what to do. And this is where agencies think very tactically. It's like, well, I should do one thing and another thing or a bunch of things at once. And that will be the key to it, right? And it's like, well, actually, like back up, like let's look at the foundation that you had laid in the same way that a home inspector would, check out the foundation. It's not just all about the curb appeal. It's like, what's going on with the bones of this, So we really try to dig into that when we first work with clients to understand like what is missing strategically that maybe wasn't laid from the beginning. So I wouldn't say there's a perfect time to do strategy other than the beginning. The beginning is the best if you can think about doing it then. But if you didn't, it's not a big deal. You can always back up and relay that foundation.
And to Nora's point, sometimes you need to get into market and you need to understand who you are and what you love. We know the typical agency birth story as like I was at a shop and decided that I wanted to go off and do my own thing, and I had some relationships and I had some business that would probably follow me, and went out and did that. I had some people that would support some team members that could fill these roles, and then some of those relationships turned into business, and there's that network that gets the agency started. And but then once they're establishing what their core capabilities are and the industries that they want to serve, then everything starts to change because we bring on clients, and then we need to staff up and we need more resources for those to support those clients. When we don't have the pipeline or we don't have that next piece of revenue, that's when margins start to get really tricky because we need to service this client, but we've overstaffed or we've over-resourced and our utilization is off. And so, those are the things that kind of help shape the agency's foundation. And sometimes you need to go through a little bit of that, or it's like, hey, we started working, we thought that we wanted to have this capability or deliver this capability. And it's like, that's not really what we want to do. So anyway, sometimes it just takes a period of time to really figure out who you are, and then we need to refine it from there. But to the earlier point, there has to be that foundation of strategy to inform the tactics, because that's where we see most agencies going wrong, is grasping onto a tactic because they've gotten to a place where they either want to grow or they need to grow, and they just want to do something. And we applaud them for the initiative of wanting to do something and putting some oomph behind their growth plan. But if you don't have the strategy to inform the tactic that you're choosing, it's likely going to fail because it's not going to serve you well. You don't know how long that tactic should take to come to fruition. You don't know what resources you really need to see it all the way through. And it might just not be a good representation of the agency. The way that, coming back to that branding work, the way that you show up out in public, if that's fake, we all know and see these, fake personalities, whether it's a brand or a person. Authenticity is palpable, and if we aren't authentic to ourselves, then that resonates with the brands that you're trying to bring on as clients. And so we need to be able to leverage that strategy, or to build that strategy to then inform the tactics, so that it can then be authentic and then it's natural, and you're not showing up to a party with a fake personality and trying to be somebody that you're not, and it's just a painful experience for everyone. I think most agencies think that growth is a challenge and it's painful and it's like pushing this boulder up the hill. And that's because they're pushing a boulder up the hill. They're not doing the things that are natural to them. It's like, trying to go run a marathon when you hate, why would you choose to do that? Go find a way to exert yourself that resonates with who you are as a brand, and the resources and the expertise that you have, and the way that your prospects expect you to show up. So all of that should be very fluid and natural. Not to say that it's easy, but it feels more seamless and more authentic when you've done the work to figure out who you are and how you should show up.
Awesome. So in your work, you talk about this concept of first mile strategies. Can you share what those are?
Yes. So the analogy here is that, as I said, a lot of people want to come and have us fill the pipeline, right? It's like, oh, you do business development? we would like leads. It's like, I'm sure you would. And we all do, right? But first, let's talk about that foundation, right? And so if you think about, to use Eric's point about running, and this is a running analogy, which is hilarious because I'm not a runner, but I like analogies. So here we go. So if an ultra marathon is 100 miles, sometimes less, sometimes more, but let's call it 100. Okay. So that's pitching. That is like, we're going to have to pitch. We're going to have to do biz dev. We're going to have to do marketing. I'll just use pitching as like a catch all for like selling ourselves, right? Like that's a constant, always on process for agencies. It shouldn't be a stop and a start. You should always have your foot on the gas. So if that process is, 99 out of 100 miles, the point is that if these foundational strategies were not laid, if in the first mile of a race, you had a really bad blister, well, the other 99 miles are going to be really painful to run. Or if you had a shin splint that you didn't wrap or something in mile 1, how are you going to run the other 99 miles? And so it's like almost like agencies are crippling themselves by not doing the strategy work first. And so what we try to do is get agencies to back up and look at those first mile strategies. And so those are, as a strategist myself, I think strategy is done a disservice by kind of being all lumped together. There's so many different types of strategy. And so what we do is we break out first mile strategies into four core strategies, which are brand, business, content, and comms. Okay. So content and comms are kind of like sisters. They go together. They go to the party together. You kind of don't have one without the other. But if you haven't thought through your brand strategy, your why, what you're all about, your aesthetics, your narrative, your story, all of that, that's super important. And then from a business, strategy standpoint, who are you for? And is there a service market fit between what your ICP wants and needs and what you offer? Like, are you going to be like magnets that attract each other and it's like an instant sale and an instant click and connection? Or are you going to be like ships in the night that missed each other? Like, I said I do this and this person actually wanted something we don't even do or offer. It's like disconnect, So there's that. Of course, there's all stuff about like pricing and profit and all that good stuff that kind of fits into business strategy. And we've talked before with you, Corey, about like go-to-market strategies. So like if you're trying to go to market in a different, new, better way, like how do you get yourself prepared for that? Like that kind of sits probably somewhere between a few of those. Like I'd be interested to hear what your perspective on go-to-market, like how you think about how that crosses brand, business, content, and comms. But yeah, that's kind of how we think about it, is that if you don't lay that first mile foundation, if you don't get prepped for the race, it's going to be a really hard, exhausting race. And that's, I think, how a lot of people think about biz dev or growth, is that it's just exhausting. And you have to prepare, for a race that's that long.
Agency owners, in 2024, do you want to finally escape founder-led sales? My book, Anyone, Not Everyone, gives you a unique solution to a big problem that digital agency owners face, serving too many types of clients. In my book, I guide you through my proven 5-step process, helping you to transform from a generalist to a vertical market specialist. The best part is the methods in this book are simple, authentic, and effective. It's been endorsed by well-known author Dr. Benjamin Hardy, legendary marketer Aaron Ross, positioning expert April Dunford, gifting expert John Rulin, as well as many leading agency owners and thought leaders. So whether you're a seasoned agency owner or just getting started out, my book, Anyone, Not Everyone, is your ultimate resource to unlock your agency's potential and scale revenue. The book launches in March, and the good news is that you can go to my website right now and sign up to be notified when it launches. You'll also get access to some early bonuses just by signing up to be notified today. Go to anyoneNotEveryone.com. That's anyoneNotEveryone.com. Now back to the show. I love that analogy of the ultra marathon and having a blister in the first mile. Makes good sense. When you think of brand strategy, how do you approach creating a brand strategy for an existing agency who maybe is, busy doing a lot of work for a lot of different types of clients. Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of times we're reinventing a wheel that doesn't need to be reinvented. So, for instance, and this is a controversial topic amongst strategists because some people will say, don't use the brand archetypes. Like, you can get to strategy in all these different ways, and some people are like, use the brand archetypes. It's like a short circuit and that's kind of how I think about it. It's like, this is Carl Jung's, getting back to psychology, Carl Jung's psychological theory that he developed in the 30s or 40s. He's long dead, but don't make him roll around in his grave. Don't misuse the archetypes. Use them correctly. They exist. This is principles of human psychology, collective subconscious. The archetypes show up in every story throughout time immemorial, whether it was, an oral narration or written in a book or your favorite show or TV, or I see, the stormtrooper behind you, Corey, on your shelf. Star Wars is a great example of story, right? Heroes and villains. And Yoda is a great example of the sage archetype. Star Wars has a little bit of all the archetypes represented in it because it's such an epic tale. But it's when those archetypes show up in brands and brands use them to great effect, Disney uses the magician and Nike uses the hero, and somebody like Harley Davidson utilizes the rebel and Mercedes uses the ruler. It's they do that for a reason. It's because when those archetypes show up in brands, we instantly recognize them. It's oh, I recognize that. It's we recognize the explorer in Indiana Jones or in Jeep, or in Patagonia. It's oh, I know that. I know him. It's it's instantly comfortable. And most people outside of our world and psychology don't think about why that is that they recognize characters or relate to characters so strongly or have these affinities in stories. And a lot of it is because it's underpinned by psychology and by the archetypes. So we have a process we take brands through for that. And it's actually based on this book and card deck. I never have the cards far from me because I do this work a lot. So I call it brand tarot. It looks like tarot cards. Oh, nice. It's read my
awesome.
cards. But it's a book called Archetypes in Branding by Margaret Hartwell. Oh, and cool. It's fantastic. It really helps brands understand, and by that token, agencies take our own medicine, right? If you're doing this for brands, why can't you do it for yourself? And so it was really helpful. We did that process for ourselves when we were building our brand. It really informed a lot of our strategy work. And it can really, using something like that can short circuit your brand strategy down to a matter of days or weeks, not months or years. So use the tools that are already available. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go with something that's tried and true. You don't have to invest a lot. This book is $33 on Amazon. You could get it and work on this in a couple weeks and you would be in a different spot than you are today.
That's awesome. So once the agency now has a sort of a new narrative and differentiated point of view and messaging, what's the next step?
Well, it really depends on what they're looking to accomplish. And that's, we've designed a process that we take agencies through, and we kind of call it choose your own adventure, because like people, every agency is different, and we don't expect every agency to need the same process to get where they're going. Yes, there are certain things within those first mile strategies that we believe should be addressed and optimized. But some agencies have done some of that work and succeeded at it. Some agencies haven't even approached it or thought about it or knew they should think about it. And some agencies have done part of it. And so we have a specific engagement that we do. It's called the Clarity Workshop. It's 2 days that takes agencies on day one through these strategy principles, and day two, out of the strategy that we've developed, it informs the tactics that we should focus on. But it's a kind of choose your own adventure model that allows them to say, hey, these are some of the things that we really feel like we need to address. Now, out of that, there are some core modules that we have that we kind of dictate that we do with every.
Force people to do.
Force.
You're the expert. I would hope so.
Yeah, that are mandatory to give us the framework that we need to understand, what we're trying to accomplish. But again, it's we have these conversations with agencies, and what are you looking to accomplish? And obviously, through Nora and I's experience of having been in and around hundreds of agencies, we can kind of get a sense of what they may need help with. But oftentimes they have a decent idea. Like if we're being honest with each other, they say, hey, like these are things we haven't addressed, or these things are things that like we feel like we haven't nailed. And so that's a great way for us to get started with an agency to help them kind of figure some of that stuff out. And, and then we kind of go from there.
Yeah, that 2 days sounds like it's there's a lot of clarity. We call it a clarity workshop. I think that it's a well named workshop. When it comes to growth tactics, so you go into strategy and you help create a more clearly defined brand. You go through some effort to help the business really get clear on the financials and trying to uncover consistent positive revenue growth and whatnot. And you also focus on content and comms, but then you go back to, or do you go back to sort of growth tactics? Like how at the end of the day, you've done all this work and they've hired you because they don't have a clear growth strategy. Do you go back into the tactics once you have all this foundation work created?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Corey, the reality is like, nobody's hiring us just to do this work because like they want to do this work. Everybody's trying to get to more dollars. I mean, like that's what we're at. But Nora and I feel very strongly that it has to be founded in strategy, because again, if we don't have the strategy, then the tactics are going to fall flat. But the tactics are how we show up. The tactics are how we interface with our ICP, with the stakeholders, with the marketers, with whoever it is. And so again, we don't want to misinform our clients and the agencies that we're working with by recommending something before we know that it's right for them. We often use the example of everybody's been in an agency where it's like, hey, everybody's got to write a blog a week, or and it's like, what typically happens is everybody in the agency hates the blog, and so the blog, including the CEO, never writes the blog. There's situations of agency CEOs being on a podcast and they're introverts and they don't feel comfortable, and it's just painful for everyone. Or it's like, oh, hey, like you've got to do a proactive outbound email strategy, and it's like, when your brand positioning is not aligned and your site's terrible and you don't know how to talk about the way you solve problems, you send an email out and then somebody comes, if they do come back to your site, they don't see themselves in, Nora talks a lot about, we want to, we want our prospects, our ICP to be looking in a mirror when they're on our site. They want them to be able to see, oh, hey, you're for me. You've got expertise in my problem, in my category. You've solved this problem before. You understand me. And if all those things aren't working, then those tactics fall flat. And so again, we do the strategy, and it's, I don't say like it's inevitable, but by spending a few hours with an agency, we've got a good sense of who they are and what they're passionate about. And I use this example a lot. There was an agency that we worked with last year, and we were in a room for a couple of days with the 3 women that led this agency. And on day 1, there was a point when like 2 of the 3 women looked physically nauseous. Like we talked about their growth goal and the number they needed to hit, and what it was going to take to get there, and they just looked like they wanted to leave the room. By the end of day 2, when we had clarified what they were passionate about, what their each unique skill sets were, and then how that was going to translate into hitting that number, they were excited. Like they were like ready to take on the world. They didn't feel like they were like carrying a weight up a hill. They felt like, oh, this is something like I actually want to do. And like one of the 3 women is, this is something that I want to do more of, or this is something I want to be better at. So it was a cool opportunity for her to like take on something. It's like kind of like learning a new language. And so, Corey, that's the place that we want to get with agencies, where it's like, yeah, this feels natural. These are things that I can do authentically, that don't feel like a tactic. They feel like me just showing up and that aligning with the types of clients that we're going after, the types of work that we want to do. And then it all just feels good. It doesn't feel like you're beating down the door of someone trying to get them, like trying to sell them encyclopedias or something.
So what Eric's saying is that I make people want to throw up and Eric makes them jump for joy.
No,
that's why you guys are a good team.
You gotta have strategy and tactics together. One without the other, not very helpful. So that's why we're a good duo, good ham and egg. I bring the strategy, he brings the tactical excellence and execution. Because that's the two kind of places people fall down. Like we just don't have a strategy and we don't know what to do for a strategy. I can help with that. And then Eric is a great, manager and quarterback and sort of game maker of okay, how do we then take that strategy and action it and make it real and bring it out into the world? And we talk all the time about how, nobody hires us to produce their podcast because we're not podcast producers. However, if we've set a strategy and we are going after a pretty significant shared growth goal together for the next 12 months, in our sort of longer, bigger partnership model with a handful of agencies we do this with, we'll actually act as their fractional CGO, CMO, and we're the managers of getting all of that done. So whether they have internal resources that can help support that, or it's external resources that they're budgeting for to support it, we kind of are the managers of all of those resources to just get the plan into action. Because that's the two problems. We just don't have a strategy at all. Or now that we have this great strategy, who the heck is going to do this? Who's going to oversee this? We're busy, we're pitching, we're working on our clients, we're doing annual planning, all those things about, again, working in the business that you're doing. You don't have time to work on the business and you can't figure out how to make time. So we can help facilitate that.
That's definitely a big value add. I was laughing, Eric, what you were saying earlier about the person saying, well, everyone has to write blog posts. That was me at once upon a time where I told my team they had to be subject matter experts, but that was short-lived.
Did you ever survey them and ask them, who here likes to write? You'd be surprised how few people actually like writing.
We there was a spreadsheet, but it was more prescriptive.
There was a spreadsheet.
The wrong way to do it. It was the wrong way to do it.
It all started with a spreadsheet.
Well, listen, guys, I've really enjoyed getting to know you both and hearing more about just how you approach agency growth strategy first, always, and I'm a big proponent of that. So I love all of this. What would be sort of your parting advice for that agency owner who, as you were saying earlier on, who doesn't have a clear growth strategy, who doesn't have consistent growth? What's the first thing, or what's a small thing that they could do to make an impact in that?
I think that it's wise to always talk to somebody outside of your four walls. And, that's not necessarily Nora and I, maybe it's you, maybe it's not you, Corey, whoever you're comfortable with. It's kind of going to a doctor that aligns with your principles and the things that you care about. Go have a conversation with an expert, somebody that knows how to observe from the outside in and has solved these problems before. Because again, there's a difference between coaches, and not all coaches, but someone that's just a coach that's kind of never been in the business or kind of in that field, but somebody that's been there and done that. I think there's real value to having had executed on the principles that you're talking about. And so I think it's really important just to talk to somebody and say, hey, these are some of the things that we're facing. These are some of the things that we're thinking about. These are the things that we want to be better at. Can you give me some real feedback, some real honest feedback? And that's a good kind of initial measurement point of understanding where you are and some of the things that you should shore up. We have a kind of a diagnostic that we take agencies through that is related to and kind of goes beyond those first mile strategies. But it's an objective way to measure where an agency is in relation to the things that they want to accomplish, and having some way to do that. It doesn't have to be a scorecard or a diagnostic or an audit, but somebody that has been around agencies and has helped them grow and has seen the challenges that you're facing is a great reference point.
Yeah, and I think the doctor or medical analogy is apt in this case because, you shouldn't WebMD yourself. We all know that, right? We're not qualified to diagnose ourselves. So you want to go to a doctor who knows what they're doing. You want to go to an expert, but also you want that person to diagnose before they prescribe. If I walked into my doctor with a headache and they started cutting my head open, I'd be pretty upset about that. Maybe I just needed Tylenol. So just because, we're working on agency growth and challenges, it doesn't mean that every agency is a dumpster fire. I mean, like plenty of agencies we talk to have already been growing. They've been doing a good job. Now they're just trying to figure out the ceiling, like how up is up? Like what's the point of diminishing returns? And like, could I double this, triple this, quadruple this? I always laugh about this whole 10x your business thing. Like that's not a thing. And usually in services, like if you don't have IP and you don't have software or product, you're probably not going to 10x, but I have been places that have doubled or tripled in a short amount of time. And like, that makes you look really attractive for acquisition. If you can go from 5 to 10 million plus, like now you can sell your business if and when you want to, typically speaking. So yeah, I think really just to Eric's point, getting a proper diagnosis on what's going on. If you know something's wrong and you can't figure it out, then yeah, just talk to someone, see if you can get some help.
Beautiful. Great advice. Where can people reach out to you to strike up a conversation?
Well, you will find Nora on LinkedIn. She was recently dubbed the LinkedIn lady.
Nice.
So at Nora DiNuzzo on LinkedIn. And of course, you can find us on our website, bloodsweatandtears.co. The "and" is spelled out. And so those are the places that we show up. And, we're typically visiting agencies around the country. And every time we're there, we do a little happy hour. So tune into our LinkedIns, and we'll let you know where we're going to be, and if there's an opportunity to get together with other industry folks and have a drink, then we would love for you to show up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for coming on. It's been really a great interview.
Thank you so much for having us, Corey.
Of course. That's it for today. I'm Corey Quinn, and I hope you join me again next time on the Deep Specialization Podcast. If you received value from this show, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.